Planet Reddit. Today's story is...
My mother-in-law demanded that I pay for my sister-in-law's wedding after my promotion, and when I refused, she tried to humiliate me publicly. 5 months later, they received their instant karma. I recently got a significant promotion at work. After several years of dedication, I was appointed financial director. The situation looks excellent because, as I was informed, if I continue to demonstrate my ability, I could take over as CEO when the current founder retires in approximately 2 years. Apparently, she has been quietly preparing me to take control. This news filled me with joy, so I decided to organize a small gathering to share it with my family. I never imagined that this would trigger so much conflict. When I say family, I mean my parents, my younger sister, my in-laws, including my husband's sister and her fiancé. Naturally, my husband and children were also present. It was an intimate celebration. I announced my promotion during the meal and everyone congratulated me. That night passed without incident. However, approximately 8 or 9 hours ago, my husband's parents contacted me to say that my new position would surely come with a considerable raise. I replied affirmatively, without foreseeing their intentions. Now, I think I should have denied this information or made something up, because they immediately asked me, as a longtime family member, 8 years of relationship and 4 of marriage, to contribute financially to their daughter's wedding. I was astonished because they had even calculated a significant sum. Naturally, I rejected their request, explaining that I have my own children, life, and financial responsibilities. I told them that the most I could offer was a good wedding gift, as is customary, but they started arguing, accusing me of selfishness. I don't understand how this constitutes selfishness, considering that it is my money and I can use it as I see fit. I have no obligation whatsoever to finance the marriage of my husband's sister, especially since she, her partner, and their respective families have sufficient resources to cover the expenses. They are simply trying to keep their money at my expense, something I am not going to allow. Therefore, I confronted them. It is probably the first serious confrontation I have had with my in-laws, as we generally maintain a cordial relationship. I don't know what happened to them, but the situation became quite unpleasant. It became personal. They called me self-centered, expressed regret for having accepted me into their family, and in general, behaved very discourteously. Eventually, I got tired of arguing, so I ended the call and blocked them to avoid further interactions. I was at my workplace at the time, so I decided to leave with the intention of talking about this with my husband later. However, before I could do so, just a couple of hours later, my husband started calling me insistently, asking me to check my social media profiles. Upon doing so, I discovered that my in-laws had posted a long message accusing me of selfishness, falsely claiming that I had insulted and belittled them when they simply asked for help to cover the expenses of their daughter's wedding, especially considering my recent promotion. They claimed that they had asked me for assistance because they considered me part of the family and expected me to be willing to support them. It was completely absurd. In reality, they were the ones who verbally abused me. But in their publication, they presented me as the villain, and for some inexplicable reason, they were trying to publicly humiliate me. Naturally, this publication outraged me, and during my telephone conversation with my husband, I told him exactly what had happened. My husband knows me deeply. Our relationship is extensive. We had been friends even before we started our romance, and I knew perfectly well that I was telling him the truth. I was simply calling to confirm the version that I already believed. He reassured me, saying that he would take care of the matter. Minutes after our conversation ended, my husband's sister tried to contact me, but I was too busy and upset to talk to anyone else. However, I needn't have worried about her reaction because after I didn't answer her call, she left a message explaining that she had seen the post and was convinced that her parents were lying. She told me that she had spoken to her brother and knew exactly what had happened, expressing regret for the unjustified situation her parents had put me in. She assured me that they would take care of resolving the problem. I didn't fully understand what she was referring to until my in-laws started trying to contact me to apologize. Apparently, both children decided to cut off relations with them due to the shameful behavior they displayed. They have been constantly sending me emails, this being the only means available to contact me after having blocked them everywhere. They beg my forgiveness and ask me to intercede so that their children reestablish communication with them. However, I feel no inclination to oblige them. So am I the one in the wrong for refusing to forgive my in-laws after their attempt to publicly humiliate me? Update 1. This situation has been rather complicated these last few days since the confrontation with my husband's parents, so I haven't been able to update before. Here is what has happened so far. That day, I experienced a lot of confusion and did not fully understand what was happening or why my in-laws were suddenly acting so unusually. 2 days later, my husband's sister came to our house accompanied by her fiancé. My husband and I sat down to listen to her explanation. Apparently, my father-in-law made some unfortunate investments in recent years and, in short, lost considerable amounts of money without informing anyone. In addition, he and my mother-in-law maintain an excessively luxurious lifestyle. My mother-in-law, in particular, I am sorry to say, lacks financial awareness and splurges on unnecessary items. She invariably buys the most expensive products when she goes shopping, which happens frequently, and my father-in-law has never objected. In fact, I am convinced that they take pride in being able to spend large sums of money without thinking, when they really cannot afford to behave in this way. My husband and I were completely unaware of the situation, and according to my husband's sister, even they were not aware of it until recently. They began the wedding preparations a couple of months ago, and naturally, given that my in-laws contributed financially to our wedding, my husband's sister assumed that they would do the same for theirs, which seemed fair and logical, as she was unaware of the family's true financial situation at the time. Gradually, he began to notice anomalies in his parents' behavior. And, as they were too proud to admit it voluntarily, he had to confront and pressure them until he got the truth. Finally, they confessed. This obviously created complications because her parents could contribute much less than anticipated. They would have to significantly reduce expenses and modify the scale of their celebration, but since her parents offered sincere apologies and seemed genuinely ashamed, she decided to keep the matter quiet. She, her fiancé, and his parents would continue to finance the wedding, trying to stick to their budget without relying too much on their parents' help. She was happy with this solution, as were her fiancé and her future in-laws. However, apparently the fact that the fiancé's parents would contribute while they could not do so to the same extent made my in-laws uncomfortable, possibly because they are extremely keen to maintain a certain superiority in financial matters, regardless of how false this appearance may be. They are essentially show-offs who do not hesitate to flaunt wealth they no longer possess. When they found out about my promotion, they calculated that I could potentially help them contribute significantly to the wedding, thus avoiding looking bad and impressing their daughter's fiancé and his parents. Apparently, when my husband and his sister spoke to their parents, they explained that their intention in asking me for money was to use it to hold the wedding on a grand scale as they had originally planned, avoiding disappointing their daughter with cutbacks. When I refused their request, they already felt cornered. My refusal to help them was simply the final trigger of their frustration, provoking their fury and culminating in that publication that was intended to discredit me, although obviously the plan failed. The family members who know me know that I would never act as they described, and the situation worsened for my in-laws because not only did no one believe their version, but they were inevitably exposed. In their publication, they mentioned having requested my financial help due to current economic difficulties, and they could no longer pretend otherwise because they themselves had made this public statement. As they tried to present me as the antagonist, they inadvertently revealed the secret they had so carefully protected. Now, as well as being upset that their own children are not speaking to them and that their plan backfired, they feel shame and regret for their actions, especially as their precarious financial situation is now common knowledge. After my husband's sister had fully explained the situation with his parents, my husband simply told me that I didn't have to answer to them or forgive them if I didn't feel it sincerely, as their behavior had been completely irrational and absurd. At this point, nobody wants to associate with them because they have truly shamed themselves and their children with their actions, and honestly, I fully agree with this perspective. From my point of view, it is not only about the shame and humiliation of the whole situation, but also about how they treated me. We had maintained an excellent relationship until now, and I never would have imagined that they would react like this simply because I made a completely rational and sensible decision regarding my finances. The way they spoke to me was truly offensive, and I don't think that even with this explanation, I will be able to find in me the capacity to forgive them anytime soon. They can continue to send me emails and try to communicate with me by any means, but I will not talk to them for now. Over the last few days, I have received between 3 and 4 emails a day, and they probably think that I will forgive them if they continue to put pressure on me and try to make me feel guilty. Each of their messages basically contains the same content. They express regret, they claim not to have really thought about what they said, they express fear that they have permanently damaged their relationship with their children, and they consider that I am the only person who can help them at the moment. They trust that if I forgive them, their children will follow my example and also resume communication, allowing them to resolve everything as a family and overcome this incident. Although worded differently, all their messages convey the same message. No matter how much they insist that they didn't mean what they said, that doesn't mean I can just forget about it and pretend it never happened. Their behavior hurt me deeply, and I certainly do not plan to suppress my feelings just because they regret that their children do not talk to them. If by chance my husband and his sister had decided to maintain communication with them, I doubt that they would feel so much regret for their actions. More importantly, it is not my responsibility to mediate so that their children talk to them again. They did not reflect on their actions, and that is their responsibility, not mine. They need to face the consequences instead of trying to make me feel responsible for something beyond my control, because I did talk to my husband and his sister about this, including all the emails received, and they both agreed with me. They assured me that it is definitely not my responsibility to reestablish their communication with their parents, and it is strange that they assume that if I forgive them, they will automatically do the same. We do not form a single entity, nor are they under my control or my subordination. They are independent individuals with free will to decide. Even if I did forgive them, my husband and his sister would still need time, something over which I have no influence. Therefore, it makes no sense for them to continue sending me messages in this way, as they only manage to irritate me without any other result. In short, my husband's sister, her fiancé, my husband and I had an extensive conversation about these matters, concluding that for now it would be preferable to keep our distance from his parents, as they are clearly going through a difficult period and we really prefer not to get involved with them for the time being. We couldn't help feeling somewhat guilty considering their advanced age, but honestly, their behavior was completely inappropriate. Their age does not give them license to treat others horribly. They must face the consequences of their actions, and if that makes them feel bad, they will have to deal with that too. I don't particularly regret my decision, nor does my husband, although we are concerned that our children may miss them, as they have a close relationship with both sets of grandparents. I don't know how they will react. Naturally, we don't plan to explain anything about this conflict to them because of their young age, and because they don't need to know, but they will surely ask about them eventually. Then I don't know how we will proceed. I guess we'll just have to resist and manage it, because it would be extremely toxic to keep them around right now, even for the sake of the grandchildren. I simply don't want any interaction with them, and I'm completely serious about keeping my distance. In any case, I know that at least my parents will visit, so I hope this will keep the children sufficiently distracted to avoid complicated questions. Anyway, that's all for now. Many thanks to those who responded to my original post with advice and reassurances that I wasn't wrong. It was extremely kind of you. If anything else happens, I will definitely post another update, as this has all been quite useful and therapeutic in a way. But until then, that's it, and thank you very much. Update 2. Greetings to all. 3 weeks have passed since my husband, his sister, and her fiancé interrupted contact with his parents. In the last few days, they had completely ceased their attempts to communicate with me, so I assumed that perhaps they were accepting their mistake and our decision not to talk to them. However, yesterday afternoon, my parents called me to inform me that my husband's parents had contacted them and verbally attacked them without any justification. My parents had known about the situation from the beginning, and like us, they had also suspended relations with my in-laws, so they did not maintain contact, although they had not blocked them on any platform. They had simply stopped responding to them. But yesterday, my father-in-law insistently called my father about 30 times until he finally answered, just to end the situation. I suggested that he should have blocked him, but I guess our parents' generation works differently. The point is that when my father answered, my in-laws immediately began to attack him. They started complaining about me and my attitude, claiming that I was being excessively difficult, that they had already apologized countless times, and that it was incomprehensible that I was still not willing to forgive them. They even accused me of preventing my husband from speaking to them and of manipulating his sister to behave similarly. On hearing this, I was extremely glad that I had not responded to their messages or forgiven them, as they clearly did not genuinely regret anything. They were simply feigning regret in order to obtain my forgiveness and to get my husband and his sister to follow my example. Even now, they were trying to present me as the antagonist, when in fact I had done absolutely nothing. I don't understand why they think I have so much influence over their son and daughter. It is extremely offensive to my husband and his sister that their own parents act as if they lack the capacity to make independent decisions without my approval. It's just weird in general, and it seems like they're just looking for a scapegoat to pin all the blame on, and I'm their target. As if their accusations were not enough, they decided to personally attack my parents as well, and that's where I drew the line. They can say whatever they want about me and attack me all they want. It hardly affects me, but they have absolutely no right to criticize my parents. I'm not the kind of person who will silently tolerate any words against them. And they had said many terrible things about my parents. They branded my parents as failures, arguing that I reflected their deficient upbringing. They called them stingy, comparing me to them, and dug up numerous past issues completely irrelevant to the current situation. For example, they boasted of having invested more money in our wedding than my parents, even though they were the ones who insisted on contributing the most, thus allowing my parents to exceed despite their efforts. To reproach them for this now, particularly considering their current financial circumstances, completely lacks logic. My parents barely reacted. They simply listened to my in-laws, and after they finished, while they were waiting for my father's response, he simply ended the call and finally blocked them. Then he contacted me to tell me what had happened. He advised me not to get involved or give them the satisfaction of getting a reaction from me, but I simply couldn't help myself. I was furious. And after informing my husband about what had happened, I decided to unblock them, and together we called his parents from his phone. When they answered, I took control of the conversation and really expressed my indignation to them. It wasn't that they remained silent. They tried to argue, but I didn't even let them finish their sentences. I wasn't going to let them get away with talking to my parents like that, especially when they had absolutely no relation to the conflict. This matter was between them and me. They had no reason to involve my parents, except for simple pettiness. What they had said was incredibly disrespectful towards them. Therefore, they were not going to express all that and consider it okay because I would simply ignore it and forget about it. The fact that I had not formally responded or published a reply to their attempt at public humiliation on social networks did not mean that I would allow them to act with impunity. They needed to understand this. Anyway, we had a telephone discussion for about 15 minutes before ending the call after I had fully expressed my frustration. I must admit that I felt considerably better because I had released all my anger and now I am not worried about what happens. I can only say that I am extremely satisfied that I did not choose to forgive them because they clearly do not deserve it. Update 3. Greetings again. It has been quite a while since my last update. This is because after my last interaction with my husband's parents, they did not bother us for a period of time. I think it has been almost 5 months since then, but recently it all resurfaced, so here I am again. Invitations were recently sent out for my husband's sister's wedding, and considering previous events, she did not invite her parents. Since that telephone confrontation following her insults towards my parents, my husband and his sister have been deeply upset with their parents and have basically stated that unless they offer me and my parents a sincere apology in person, they will not resume communication. As my in-laws have made no effort in this regard, neither my husband nor his sister have spoken to them. During these 5 months, there has been absolute silence. I don't know why they expected their daughter to invite them to the wedding, especially after 5 months without communication. However, when they discovered that the invitations had been distributed without including them, they immediately tried to contact their daughter, but failed because she had blocked them. So they decided to visit her a couple of days ago to talk in person. She made it very clear that she would have no relationship with them unless they apologized to me and my parents. They also made a fuss about this. Even then, they chose to blame me, claiming that I had manipulated them all, and warned that she would regret treating them like that. They threatened to exclude her from the inheritance to benefit my husband exclusively. But ironically, their daughter reminded them that they had hardly any assets left and were living on their retirement funds, which would soon be exhausted given their rate of spending. So when there was eventually any inheritance left, she seriously doubted that there would be anything left for her and her brother to fight over. Naturally, this was intolerable for them. They insulted her before leaving, and then made another post in their usual style, casting themselves as the victims and everyone else as villains. They posted about our supposed mistreatment and disrespect towards them, and how they had decided to boycott the wedding, omitting to mention that they hadn't even been invited initially. As always, nobody believed their claims, and the little respect they had managed to retain was also lost with this particular post. It really is very sad when you think about it, but it can't be helped. They really brought it on themselves, and if they had acted decently from the start, none of this would have happened, but they dug their own graves, and now they have to face the consequences. My husband and I don't worry about them at all as long as they don't bother us. We were concerned that our children would ask about their grandparents, and they did indeed do so a couple of times initially, but recently they seem to have forgotten about them. So even that is no longer a problem, and we are both busy with our work responsibilities, so we really lack time to think about them and the absurd drama they are trying to generate. Update 4. Greetings again. A week has passed since the wedding, and thank God, everything went perfectly. Obviously, my husband's sister was unable to hold the wedding she had originally planned. They had to cut back considerably, but they seemed extremely happy. It didn't make the slightest difference to her on her big day, and I couldn't be more pleased for her. We received numerous queries about the absence of her parents from people less active on social media, but we skillfully avoided them because we wanted the attention to be focused on the couple and nobody else. I am convinced that becoming a topic of conversation would have been exactly what they would have wanted. Finally, the ceremony, reception, and everything else went extremely well. We enjoyed it immensely, and it was wonderful to be part of and celebrate their love. We were thrilled and grateful that everything went so perfectly, without any complications.